Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for session 2 from our online international conference on social and emotional learning and context. Again, this conference is co-organized by the Amakin Foundation in Morocco and NISM, networking to integrate SDG target 4 and skills into educational materials. We have a packed agenda for session number 2. Our presenters are ready to go ahead and share all their social and emotional learning case studies and research in the field. As we talked this morning about this holistic development of social emotional learning and how it's very important to integrate the educational system in today's pressing world. Today we're going to hear from Miss Dalia El-Hawari. She comes to us from Alexandria University. She's a lecturer of English as a foreign language pedagogy and curriculum at the Faculty of Education, Alexandria in Egypt. She has over 20 years of experience working in initial teacher education and teacher professional development programs. She has participated in international educational projects with leading educational institutions in Egypt and around the world. Her recent research interest focuses on exploring children's experiences of learning English as a foreign language in challenging and under-resourced contexts. Her research and teaching aim to support teachers enhance the learning and well-being of all children, particularly those in challenging and under-resourced contexts. So today, her study will investigate the social and emotional aspects of children's experiences of anxiety and agency autonomy during speaking, pair work activities in the English as a foreign language primary classroom in Egypt. We're happy to have Ms. Dalia El-Hawari here join us. You have 18 minutes for your first presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for your introduction. As Sarah mentioned, today I'm here to share with you the findings and also insights we gained from conducting a research project in primary classroom in Egypt. And as you can see, our research focused on investigating the role of social and emotional aspects of learning a foreign language. In our case, it was English inside the primary classroom. So, what was the research? Our research aimed at trying to bring small and visible changes at the classroom level that did not really require change at policy level, but at the same time could impact on children's experience of learning English as a foreign language, particularly helping them to learn to speak English and also supporting their overall well-being. So in order to do this, we used an intervention in which we trained and supported teachers to use pair work activities in a way that developed children's speaking skills and also built their competence, autonomy, and relatedness, which we coined CAR. Now, this was very important because in the Egyptian context where we conducted our research, using pair work and interactive techniques was not the normal practices. The normal practices were rather the teacher-centered approaches, teachers-led, more traditional grammar translation methods of teaching the language. So for our research, we used Ryan and Daki self-determination theoretical framework, which suggested that for school children to learn and thrive, they needed to feel a sense of one, competence, and this is a feeling that I can do this, I can succeed. Two, autonomy. It's the feeling that I want to do this and I have the power to do it. I'm in control. I can choose. I can be responsible for my learning. And three, relatedness. And relatedness is the feeling that I am valued and respected by others. And in the classrooms, the others will be the teachers and other classmates. So, in order to conduct our research, our procedures were as follows. We started off by training 9 teachers, where we introduced them to self determination theory and we trained them on how to use pair work. Then we went with these teachers to their schools and observed them as they implemented pair work. We provided support and feedback. So we usually went with them inside the classroom. We observed how they taught and how they used pair work, and then we invited them to reflect on their practices and to experiment with ideas and to bring improvement to how they were using power. And finally, we administered a number of quantitative and qualitative data collection tools to find out how 280 children who participated in our study experienced their work and how they felt about it. So before looking at the findings of our research, let me spend some time explaining to you how the teachers in our study used pair work activities in their classrooms. So before they actually taught these classes and during the planning stage, we guided the teachers to ask themselves 3 main questions. So the first question was for them to ask, what tasks can I give the children that will allow all of them to feel competent and successful? You also needed to consider what they can do to support the children feel autonomous and in control of their own learning. And finally, also think about what can I do to make every child feel they have a valuable role in the classroom and to encourage my class to feel like a supportive community, not a group of competing individuals. So during the planning, they had to think of these 3 questions and to look at the different tasks and to think about how they were going to approach the children, give feedback, set up activities so that they achieve these 3 goals. Now, this is how teachers were instructed and encouraged to use pair work in the classrooms. The first thing, they were very much encouraged and supported to use closed pairs versus open pairs. And closed pairs means that the children, they all worked in pairs at the same time, which was not the common practice. The common practice was rather to ask individual pairs to come in front of the classroom and perform an activity. Using closepad was very important to maximize the speaking and practice time for all the children all at the same time. We also guided the teachers to be careful and to monitor pair work activities from a distance. This was particularly important because when teachers choose to monitor learners' work from a distance, they do not intimidate learners, especially those who lacked sense of competence. And as you can see from the pictures providing illustration of pair work, the teacher is standing rather at the back of the classroom, observing how children are working but from a distance. We also guided the teachers to try and focus on encouraging practice, not correctness. And this meant that teachers should not directly correct all language mistakes because overemphasis on correctness curbs the children's sense of competence and create an atmosphere of competition rather than relatedness in the classroom. We also encourage the teachers to pair the children based on the children's preferences rather than the teachers. So the teacher let the children choose who they wanted to work with. This was very important because if the teacher chose the wrong pair, this could not, we conceived that this was not going to be supportive of children's learning. So, for example, pairing a low attainer with a high attainer might not be useful for the children. The low attainer might feel frustrated, and the high attainer might feel that he or she is not learning. And by letting children choose, the aim was to support again their autonomy and relatedness. We guided the teachers to offer as many choices as they can in the classroom. So, for example, children could choose who to work with, the role they wanted to play in the dialogue when they use dialogue for pair work, and also children could change some words in the dialogue and use words they knew or wanted to practice. And this was to support their autonomy and relatedness. So we spent a whole academic year with the teachers in the schools while they tried out pair work. And after we collected data and analyzed them, our key finding in relation to how children experience anxiety and autonomy were the following. We found a negative correlation between anxiety and autonomy. So, children who were most anxious felt reduced autonomy, which made learning to speak English more difficult. Whereas children who were least anxious and most autonomous when doing pair work felt confident and at ease to speak in English. So further analysis of the data give us more insights into pair work and in which way it was supportive and in which way it was not supportive. So I'm going to use the children words to let you share how children experience pair work in a supportive way. So one child told us, I feel happy because I speak in English. I don't feel anxious because my classmates helps me and does not make me feel anxious. So receiving, as you can see, support from a classmate made children feel less anxious. So it's kind of provided this emotional support that children needed to practice speaking English. Children also told us, my partner knows things I don't know. I ask for her help and I thank her. I do the same for her. We become better friends, we learn better, and we will do better in exams. As you can see, another example of peers providing emotional support and also linguistic support, and the children reflecting on how this is not only good for how they felt, but it was good for their own academic performance as they thought that they were going to do better in exams. Data also give us some insights into reasons that made pair work less supportive for children's learning. And we found that there were factors related to peers that made pair work less supportive. These were peer ridicule when a child made a mistake, and feeling less competent than other children in class. And let me show you now a different form of data we collected. We asked children to draw, to use drawing to express how they experience their work. This one is very interesting. As you can see, a child drew herself in tears while other children were laughing at her. And she wrote, I feel afraid when I don't know how to answer in front of my classmates and everyone starts laughing at me. Then I feel broken. So, a very vivid example of peer pressure and peer ridicule and how it can actually stop learning and make children feel very bad. I mean, the child wrote, I feel broken, which is very strong. Another drawing. Again, a child here in tears while she was working in pairs, and she wrote, Rihanna, my classmate, asks me about the meaning of a word, and I whisper quietly to myself that I don't know the answer. So here, a child feeling less competent than her peer, and this makes her again feel maybe anxious but and sad, and this we know stops learning. Now The other factor that made pair work less supportive was related to teachers. So when children were afraid of making mistakes in front of the teacher, they did not learn well. And also fear of failing to gain the teacher's approval that the child was good was another obstacle for learning. Let me show you more drawings to illustrate these 2 points. Okay, so as you can see here, the two children working in pairs while a teacher is monitoring closely, and the child wrote, "I and my classmate are asked to speak in English in pairs. The teacher comes to monitor. I say one word incorrectly and I start to feel nervous. And I feel that the teacher will think that I'm useless." So, teachers monitoring from very closely could rate the children's fear of making mistakes in front of the teacher, and they feel useless, and then again learning stops. Another drawing to show further how teachers could manage pair work in a way that's not supportive to learning. So here is a child again in tears, and the teacher is urging the child to complete the task. And the child said, "I feel very afraid and I stutter because I think that the teacher will shout at me. Then I cannot speak and I tremble." So again, teachers' pressure that the child should complete the task or should answer correctly may lead the students to stutter, to tremble, to feel afraid. And again, this is not. So we concluded that when well managed, pair work is effective in promoting children's speaking and autonomy. And well managed pair work looked like this. It provided maximum emotional and linguistic support, as you could see from peers and from teachers. It placed value on learners developing as a supportive learning community, providing support to each other rather than competing. And it ensured all learners felt valued and accepted. So focusing on participation rather than focusing on ability to produce correct language. Well-managed pair work also entailed placing value on practice and participation for all rather than correctness. And it also meant that teachers are aware of how their practices, particularly how they corrected learners and gave feedback, impacted on the range and quality of the learning opportunities that were available and were created in the classrooms. So teachers might, out of goodwill, focus on overcorrecting learners, insisting that everyone produce correct language, but this might have counter effect on children and how they experience learning in the classroom, and it might also affect their well-being in rather a negative way. As we saw from the drawing, children feel broken or feel that they are useless or feeling anxious. So this was some of the insights and the main conclusions of our research. And I think I'm not beyond the 18 minutes. And here's my contact information in case you have any further questions or you wish to contact. So, Sarah, I'm on time?
Yes, perfect timing. 20 seconds before 18 minutes.
Excellent.
Thank you so much, Ms. Al-Hawari. This is such a rich presentation about a case study in Egypt. We have many questions for you. but I was advised that we go through all the presentations and then we'll keep the questions towards the end. So we're moving on to our next presentation. So please, Ms. Al-Hawari, stay with us. We have questions for you. Our next presentation is led by Dr. Safa Azawi and Abdul Aziz Mahdi. They will be presenting a presentation around active pedagogy and university e-learning for the construction of social and emotional skills. Dr. Safa, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mrs. President, for hosting. Honorable audience, I'm honored to present the results of the research work on active pedagogy in university learning for the construction of social and emotional skills. The presentation plan will be as follows. We will start with an introduction, followed by the section on materials and methods. Then we will present the results, and finally, a conclusion. Please, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen. You can
the slides?
Slideshow. Yeah, you can start the slideshow. Yeah.
So you can see it really
Yes.
without problems?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Thank you. Because I can't project my slides. I don't know where is the problem.
We can see the slide, your slides.
Playing?
Oh.
Yeah. So, okay, thank you. Higher education is a lever for development and a vector of economic and social improvement. On the one hand, we can note that Moroccan University tends toward a new model of pedagogical innovation, thus developing HR skills through education and training. On the other hand, we can note also the importance of digital transformation and technologies, thus developing technical and social emotional skills to deliver quality higher education and thus improving pedagogical innovation. Studies suggest that face-to-face teaching is not developing the social and emotional skills. Why? The active digital learning is taken off after the COVID-19 health crisis. This training method needs to be evaluated in terms of development of social and emotional skills, which leads to the research question: does active pedagogy in university e-learning have an impact on the development of social and emotional skills? The aim of the study is to identify the teaching methods that promote building social and emotional skills in an academic context, and then to identify the learning activities that contribute to the development of social and emotional skills. We can define e-learning as the use of new multimedia technologies and the internet to improve the quality of learning by facilitating access to resources and services, as well as distance exchanges and collaboration. E-learning is also an information system that can integrate a wide variety of instructional material via audio, video, and text mediums conveyed through email, live chat sessions, online discussions, forums, quizzes, and assignments. Active learning is in instructional activities involving students in doing things and thinking what about they are doing. Social and emotional skills are individual capacities that can be manifested in consistent patterns of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So, the research framework is about interplayed and exploratory research, and the positivist positioning and the deductive reasoning. Data collection mode is quantitative. We developed a questionnaire based on the adaptation of the HiShip study to analyze the teaching learning practices pursued by students in active digital learning and administered in online to students of the Faculty of Education of Mohammed V University in Rabat. We have solicited 100 54 students, and we obtained a response rate at the average of 58%. Our sample is composed by students of fundamental license and master in technology and pedagogical innovation, with employees and non-employee students. Then we realized reliability analysis. We performed a statistical treatment of collected data with SPSS version 26 to ensure reliability and internal consistency of the data collection tool, and obtained a drawback of a value of 0.897, which indicates the good internal consistency of the issue. About the student profile, we have for gender 70% of respondents who are female and 30% of the respondents who are male. The average age is about 60%, who are aged between 18 and 25 years old. About the percentage of students mastery degrees of social and emotional skills, we can note that we have examined 4 social and emotional skills, like conversational and expressive skills, reflection and abstract thinking skills, innovative and creative skills, and teamwork skills. We can note that more than 50% of students are claim to master these 4 social and emotional skills. About the first learning practice, work according to a training project, the results show us that more than 58% of students claim to be working according to a training project. About the use of technology in courses, we have more than 71% of students are using technologies in e-learning courses. For the active involvement in courses, we can state that 57% of students have an active involvement in courses. And for self-management of learning resources, we can note that 65% of the respondents have a self-management of learning resources. And finally, for collaborative learning activities, we can note that 57% of students claim to do collaborative learning activities as shown in figure 5. About the bivariate statistical analysis and correlational analysis, we can note that variables are ordinal qualitative. Bivariate correlation analysis of these non-parametric ordinal variables was made by calculation of Kendall's Tobin correlation coefficient and to measure variables association and realize the significant test and to test the null hypothesis, which stipulated there is no dependency association or relationship between pairs of variables. The results of the bivariate correlation of perceived mastery of social and emotional skills and active learning practices, we can note that we have a highly significant correlation between the 4 social and emotional skills and the 5 learning practices in e-learning. And we can also state that we have positive correlation between active university e-learning variables and social and emotional skills with p-value less than or equal than 0.01, which is highly significant difference, and we can also reversal of the null hypothesis. So active university e-learning variables are associated to social and emotional skills. At the summary of the results, we can note that we have 2 categories of social and emotional skills. We can divide it on personal skills, like abstract thinking, reflection, and also innovative skills and creative skills, but also social skills, like conversational and expressive skills and teamwork skills. We can note that for which is self-management of learning resources are present in both in the 4 to construct the 4 social and emotional skills with a specification with learning practices that can promote each personal skills and social skills. At the end, active pedagogy in university e-learning contributes to the construction of social and emotional skills. This work can be exploited by teachers to improve university teaching practices and thus to promote pedagogical innovation. At the end, innovation is the rule, stability is the exception, but not at all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zawi. We have also a few questions for you as well. So once we are done with the presentation, the last presentation for session number 2, we'll go ahead and start the Q&A session. So our next presentation, right, our next presentation will be led by Jennifer Batten. Hi, Jennifer. Good morning, Jennifer. Do you have your cup of coffee?
Yes, two cups of coffee.
2 cups, okay. Jennifer is joining us from Ohio, and it's 5 a.m., right? Okay, so Jennifer is the co-chair of the Prevention of Armed Conflict Peace Building Network, provided training and consultation for educators and policymakers in 23 countries. She served as a senior consultant for UNESCO and on the OAS Advisory Board for the Inter-American Program on Education for Democratic Values and Practices. She's the former director of education programs for the State Government Office, the Ohio Commission on Dispute Resolution and Conflict Management, where she was also responsible for strategic planning to meet the needs of 3,600 schools and 52 teacher training colleges. She has an MA in conflict analysis, 39 hours towards her PhD, and we need to wish her good luck with her comprehensive exam coming up. Her current dissertation research is on what policies and programs support access, retention, and completion of a degree in higher education for students who are refugees. Along with Ms. Jennifer, we have Mr. Jose Fernando Mejia. He is the executive director of Aulas en Paz. I hope I pronounced that right. Classrooms in Peace in Colombia. He currently serves as the chair of the board of Eduqua Paz, and as director of the Latin American Hub for the Prevention of Violence Against Children in Schools, one of the hubs of the Coalition for Good Schools. His experience includes serving as a consultant for UNESCO and the World Bank. He also holds a BA in psychology and an EDM in international education policy from Harvard. He's a member of the Peace Education Working Group, Global Partnership for the Prevention of Armed Conflict. And today they will be presenting examples of how the knowledge, skills, and abilities associated with social emotional learning are being integrated around the globe into required and recommended educational policy standards, programming, teacher training, and direct practices and efforts to prevent, address, and manage conflict. The floor is yours. Jen and Jose, you have a little bit more than 18 minutes, so the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just a moment here, I'll get us started. So what we're going to share today is, so Jose and I are going to share a little bit about how social emotional learning is being used to prevent conflict. A little bit about what is GPAC, share some definitions, because each have slightly how we find what we're talking about with social emotional learning. We're going to look at just a couple examples. Well, if we have time, some lessons learned about some good practices for teacher preparation to make sure this policy to practice gets implemented with efficacy, and share a couple of tips that we've learned from working in the world regions with successful government and civil society partnerships. So we'll be sharing the time. Thanks. So GPAC works in all of the world's regions. You can see how they're grouped there. And so there are over 1,000 civil society organizations that are partnering to work on preventing violent conflict. So Jose and I work together with the Peace Education Working Group specifically. So those are civil society organizations, government, or many times colleges and universities working around the world to partner to address and move policy to practice on what are called social emotional learning or conflict resolution or PSED in our various countries. Been doing that for over 20 years, and our key areas and the key ways that we're doing that are to create and or operationalize policies. So all over the world, we have education policies in our countries that look good on paper, but what's happening in practice can look very different. And so here you see some of the different countries that we've worked in at various levels, and then curriculum development and implementation. So sometimes that policy is already in place, and then how do we make sure that that happens countrywide? And that includes curriculum development and teacher training. And then we're going to share a little bit about what exactly are we talking about around social emotional learning here in a moment. I'm going to hand it over to Jose.
Thank you, Jen. Good morning from Colombia. I'm going to talk about this very impressive and interesting movement that has developed over the next 2 decades. You can find a very interesting global legislation papers and guidelines that include mandates and requirements around a variety of topics that includes or relate with social emotional learning. You can find peace education, multicultural education, democracy education, citizenship education, bullying prevention, violence prevention, the movement of safe schools, all that has been done around character education and values education. So there's a richness at very different levels when you can find very interesting developments that makes a very vast list of literature on tools and topics in the Education Commission of the States from the US. You can find and search by topic very different kinds of materials, which includes policy papers and initiatives that related with this kind of topics. And in the Global Conflict Resolution Education Conference presentations, you can search by country name what has been done in very different regions around conflict resolution. So you can identify a richness around SEL that relates with very different topics and themes. And this could be a very important source of information that reflects the richness of approaches and frameworks around SEL that could be also problematic because the definition of SEL could be very difficult to grasp. Next slide, please, Jen. So, what is social emotional learning? This is very important because we really don't have an agreement about the concept. Uh, the the ESO lab from Harvard has make a mapping work around SEL. You can find it here in the Explore SEL project. They have identified more than 40 frameworks to address social emotional learning, and this is great because you can take into account very different contexts and needs of regions, schools even, and this richness is very important to take into account to construct a very comprehensive social emotional learning definition. But this could be related with the list of skills that many people think are important, and there are many skill lists. So even to agree of what skills should be developed around SEL is very problematic. And we think that on the one hand, this is great because it takes into account the different contexts and needs, but on the other hand, it could be problematic, and there's a need to build an agreement around core aspects of our definition and basically skills. So, for example, we have to be aware that any program or initiative related with SEL should include emotional regulation. And a definition that would include those could be problematic because when social emotional learning is all, it is also nothing. And CASEL could be a good option to make to build around a general agreement around these core concepts. Next slide, please, Jen. What makes CASEL, that is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, Emotional Learning, a very good starting point, is that they include different knowledge, attitudes, and skills to define social emotional learning that take into account different processes, from personal processes to social processes. So it includes self-awareness and self-manages, recognize and manage emotions, but also social awareness, that is empathy and perspective taking. And they and make social emotional learning related not only with these personal processes, but also with the responsible decision making that impacts the world and the people around us. And relationship skills are very key for this definition. Caring, concern for others, and maintain positive relations with others is important. Next slide, please. So, Jen, you can
Yep.
take.
So we just wanted to share this briefly, is that you're also going to hear other terms, including conflict resolution. And these are core concepts that you'll see very closely related to what CASEL, for instance, looks at the skills. But in conflict resolution, we would, in terms of developmental abilities, you would start with understanding the nature of conflict. You see these skills, building on that, emotions in conflict, conflict escalation, steps for handling and managing our emotions, effective communication skills, and then problem solving. So we wanted to give this example of how those skills, what those skills look like under conflict resolution. And then here we just wanted to share that when we're talking about the work of GPAC that we're trying to build around the globe in the countries where we have partners, we're looking at this comprehensive approach with, and I would really say student programming, but then you have curriculum integration, how we teach, what we teach. So the teacher training is really critical for the efficacy of the work that we're doing, and then the whole school culture. So most if not all, include work with parents and a larger school community. So we'll move into policy to practice here, and we'll start with Colombia.
Thank you, Jen. Colombia, as you know, is a country with a long history of conflict. We have guerrillas group, paramilitary group. We have more than 60 years of conflict, a peace agreement signed in 2016. But in Colombia, education is also decentralized. We don't have a national curriculum. We don't have national texts. So the Ministry of Education sets standards, and these standards are related with citizenship competencies. Some of them we have national standards for citizenship competencies since 2003. These standards are grouped, have three groups. The first group is called convivencia. It is a very difficult term in Spanish to translate. It could mean learning to live together or coexist. The other group is democratic participation, and the other group is identity and value of difference. And there is different types of standards. Some are emotional, some are communicative, and some are integrative. So since 2003, we are talking about social emotional learning in Colombia under the umbrella of citizenship competencies and peace education. We also have a national law that was promulgated in 2013. It's the National System of School Coexistence and the Exercise of Human Rights. In short, is the Convivencia Law, the Learning to Live Together law, and it includes this mandate for all schools in the country to have prevention and promotion of social emotional learning initiatives and programs. Also, it tells the schools to design protocols to deal with bullying and other issues. It defines bullying and separates of conflict resolution. And we also have something called Cátedra de Paz, that is something like a peace education class that all schools have to implement in their context. So we have a very good legislation around peace education, citizenship competencies that includes explicitly social emotional learning around conflict resolution and prevention of bullying. But as it happens in other parts of the world, there's a big gap between policy and practice. Because of that, next slide, please. We developed the program Aulas en Paz, which means classrooms in peace. Classrooms in Peace is an evidence multi-component program for the prevention of aggression. We have different components, some directed for a primary prevention and some directed for secondary prevention. We have a curriculum for every child that participates on the program and additional activities to those children that are more at risk. We have teachers training for implementing the curriculum. We work with students and families, focus on primary education because we have to prevent aggression, not deal with the aggression is already happening in very difficult to manage situations. And we develop social emotional skills for peaceful conflict and management of bullying. In 18 years, we have been in more than 500 schools in Colombia, but we also have implementation in Mexico, Chile, and we developed the national curriculum of social emotional learning for the Peruvian government. You can find it in the page of the International Development Bank. It's called Step by Step, in Spanish, Paso a Paso, and it's open for everyone who want to work with this curriculum. Next slide, please, Jen. A, a very broad perspective. 2 weeks ago, we were presenting the World Anti-Bullying Forum in the USA. What has been done in our countries to prevent bullying? And as you can see here, most of our countries have very interesting laws for working with this. Laws for preventing bullying, laws about peaceful coexistence. But we find also that in each country there is an important gap between what the laws state and what happens in reality. So what Jen is gonna present next is a very good example of how to make a reality. Policies are important, even indispensable, but they are not enough. You must have the initiatives and programs to make these policies a reality. You can take it from here again.
Thank you. So one of the things, because we're talking about, I'm going to give a few examples in countries that are in different states of conflict. And so this is an example of a challenge that we have in conflict zones working, which is, this is just an example of work that was done, that was funded in part by USAID, but in partnership with the Education Afghanistan, where sample learning competency, teacher training, development, current. Sometimes this work conflict. We have we're in Ukraine actually. There has been also in the Autonomous Republic of 2014 when Russia took over Crimea. Since 2013, and this is the first joint project with two separate ministries of education since the war in that particular zone, and working on this culture of good, which addresses many of the components, this broad comprehensive approach of student programming, pedagogy, teacher training, around the skills and strategies of social emotional learning. In addition to that, though, with the war currently in Ukraine, and you'll see many of those government and civil society partners there. Our particular partner at GPAC is the Integration and Development Center that you see up here, but they've been able to receive funding and are still able to implement and print and utilize for those students who are still within Ukraine, but also online for students who are taking course countries that are students from Ukraine. So it still continues. This website here, if you would like to see it's in English, it'll give you all of the details about the program that's been happening since 2007 in the region, and you'll be able to see a number of the different ways that they've been able to take that policy to scale. So the Philippines, one of the big things that, when we're talking about moving policy to practice, so since 2006 in the Philippines, there's been a presidential executive order, and that's the institutionalization of peace education and basic education. So for those primary, secondary schools, but also in teacher education. And however, that was on paper and there was not funding provided to support that. So how do we move that forward? So Miriam College has been asked by the Commission on Higher Ed there in the Philippines to take the lead in teaching for in-service and teacher training institutions. And so the way to really maximize, because there was limited funding, in Philippines, what they've done is they have focused on teacher preparation. And so you'll see moving since 2006 to 2019. So during COVID and post-COVID, there was a new memorandum from the higher ed. Again, this is a recommendation, though, not a requirement, stating that all higher ed institutions should integrate peace education and peace studies into relevant subjects. And so this is a good example of the civil society partner, in this case, Miriam College, partnering with the government to move this forward and providing online training countrywide for the university faculty. Another example here in a conflict zone, the ongoing conflict zone in Mindanao, Philippines, this regional conflict is there's a Bangsamoro organic law. And so how does this national law around peace education fit in a specific regional conflict? And so once the completed peace agreement between the government and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front was signed, Miriam College was able to work to train higher ed faculty under this, the Commission on Higher Ed there in the Philippines, to work with teachers, teacher training, to include peace education at all levels in that region. So, so we are close here to our 18 minutes. Let me just check in real quick with Sarah. Sarah, do we have any time left, or shall we close?
Yeah, we do have an additional 5 minutes.
5 minutes. All right, great. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and move into, very briefly, a couple lessons learned for teacher preparation, leave you with some resources and a couple of highlights in terms of how those partnerships have worked well to move that policy that looks good on paper to practice. So one of the things that we know, whether you're looking at the Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning, if you're looking at ESOL, at Harvard and looking at those good practices, is that teacher and staff development is key. And that's one of the ways that our partners around the world through GPAC have really been working, is teacher preparation in partnership with the universities, because they won't always remember what you taught them, your students, but they'll always remember how you treated them. So we really need to focus on modeling these skills. And that way, if we are able to model these skills, we know that the students are more likely to actually use and model the skills as well. One of the documents that we would be helpful if you're interested in doing this work is there is the Safety, Resilience, and Social Cohesion Guide for Curriculum Developers from UNESCO. And we can give you that link. But if the teacher doesn't give respect for all members of all ethnic groups, and this is really critically important in our conflict zones, the lessons on respect for diversity and social cohesion will have limited impact. So if you look early on at some of the work that was done in Northern Ireland, there was the, the teachers would take students on sort of separate but equal gatherings, but the work hadn't been done to really address our own biases and work around social emotional learning and how we engage in conflict and our own biases. And so that's really important to be doing in order to have positive impact. The pre-service and in-service need for ongoing training and support. So we look at, this is another excellent guide that's in multiple languages that you can download from UNESCO to develop master trainers, and some of the good tips that we know would be helpful to focus effective teacher training. And then a couple of the lessons learned for successful government and civil society collaboration. I'm going to hand this over to Jose as we close. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. And the key word here is collaboration. And to make this collaboration effective, you have to make a partnership between civil society, decision makers, and people from the educational communities. And you have to make very clear decisions about who to involve in this collaboration, who to relate with, because government change are really frustrating. So it's very important to identify key players in the government, people that doesn't change, IGO, civil society organization, what organizations are in my context that can help me to bring this collaboration to success. It is very important to include programs or initiatives as part of a broader systematic response that relate with specifically with the needs and characteristics of the context. Not selling a specific program, but developing specific solutions for each need. And it is very important to be familiar and use the government language. Some of us comes from an academic background, and communicate with the government is not always easy. It's like a different language that you have to acquire and be familiar with. Next slide, please. It is very important to know that the content should be integrated into what already has been done. The first presentation was a very good example of this. Sometimes SEL comes like a parachute, and instead of an add-on, you have to put into practice something that relates with what you are doing. The kernel's approach of the ESO lab is a very good tool to make this. It is also important to relate with people directly working with government to be fluent in processes on government procedures, but also it is important to work with people that have direct experience in working in schools. Sometimes you work only with ministries of education that doesn't necessarily have a direct experience in schools, and this could be very problematic. And you have also be flexible. There's a number of issues and challenges that makes that there is no unique answer for all of the challenges that we are facing. So be flexible is very key in this endeavor.
Great. Jen? Thank you. So we will leave it here with questions. That's our contact information, and we'll close. Thank you so much for inviting us to join you.
Thank you so much, Jen and Jose. I do have questions for you as well. We'll go ahead and start with the first presentation with Miss El Hawari, and looking back at these changes that Jose and Jen talked about, starting from the government and trying to implement all these policies, and sometimes there is a disalignment between an enacted policy and the policies on the ground. And so your presentation in your case was more of a a feasible change within the classroom. So you did not go from the top bottom approach, but you wanted to start at that level of the classroom and make changes that do not really require those policy level changes. It's from your case study and your presentation. You've talked about how it's important to integrate social emotional learning through what you called the closed pair work, which is to me was a new approach to social emotional learning, and it did trigger my attention to something that you've talked about is teacher training. So you looked at implementing an approach, but you did equip the teachers with the training. Then something that we are always trying as educators to talk about is how can we get enough training to be able to implement and integrate all these wonderful policies on paper, integrate them in our real classroom setting. The first question that comes to mind before you started this uh, case study or this approach, can you talk a little bit about what were the traditional teaching approaches that were prevalent in the classrooms before you introduced this new approach?
Thank you, Sarah, for the question. Um, because of the time limits, I did not give enough background about context in Egypt. So when I say traditional classrooms, these are mainly teacher-centered classrooms. And in the language classroom in particular, more of grammar translation methods. And my grammar translation methods, they rely heavily on the teachers doing most of the explanation and using the learner's native language to do this. And usually teachers' explanation will be followed by doing exercises, and the focus is usually on written exercises because this is part of the exam. There's very little focus on developing speaking and listening skills in the language classroom because this is not part of the assessment, which is another aspect of the system, the school system in Egypt. It's exam driven. So exams are, we use high stakes exams, passing exams, getting high grades is something very important. So although it's a language classroom, but you'll find lots of written work done in the classroom, lots of the learners' native language used, and teachers' talking time far exceeds students' talking time.
Yeah, we're all aware, coming from similar backgrounds, that some classes are test-based classes, and so teachers are teaching students not to learn, but to make sure that they pass the test. And so we forget the value of learning, even though we try to integrate social emotional learning through that. I have additional questions for you from our audience here. I'll go through the questions I received, and then I'll open the floor to see if we have any questions. So, according to your findings, how did anxiety levels relate to the sense of agency and autonomy among children during speak and pair work activities?
Okay, so we use questionnaires to assess levels of anxiety and level of autonomy as perceived by the learners. And we found correlation between autonomy and anxiety. So when students felt least anxious, they felt most autonomous. And when they felt most anxious, they felt least autonomous. So this for the correlations. But we also found through the questionnaires that students felt least anxious during pair work activities. So there was a statement in the questionnaires asking students to rate how anxious they felt on a scale of 4 when they were doing pair work. And like 90, I think it was 90, above 90% of the learners said that they felt least anxious when they did pair work.
So there is a positive, as you mentioned, positive correlation between pair work activities and the level of anxiety and sense of autonomy that is involved with that activity. Okay. The second question: what were some identified factors that influence children's agency um, with levels of anxiety when they speak English?
Could you say the question again?
What were some identified factors that influence children's agency and anxiety in the English speaking classroom? This question, if you would like to ask the question, the person who sent the question, would you like to ask the question? Elaborate
Sure.
a little bit more?
Mhm. I think the question is asks about what impacted on children's feelings of anxiety and autonomy when they did pair work. So from the data, especially particularly the qualitative data, we found that children felt supported and safe when they worked with peers who provided emotional and linguistic support. So just working with someone whose English was good and who was able to help with the task was not enough. Unless this peer also provided some emotional support in terms of encouraging, in terms of being patient. If the other peer stuttered or needed more time to think of a word in English, then the pair work did not work well. And when students felt insecure, they could not exercise their autonomy. So this is for peers. As for teachers, we found that how teachers corrected and monitored pair work was really crucial for students' sense of anxiety, of feelings of anxiety, and also autonomy. So when the teachers, particularly indirectly, not necessarily directly, but particularly indirectly, sent a message that they were looking for correct English, or they were expecting students to produce correct language, or they were going to monitor students to correct the language. Students, particularly the less competent, felt again insecure and felt that they were not competent enough to practice or to try to speak English in class. Whereas when the teacher was very careful to monitor from a distance and to focus on practice and to encourage students for just trying to speak, regardless of whether the English was correct and incorrect. This was really supported students' sense of competence, and they felt that they could really participate and practice English, and kind of did not focus on their inability to use the language.
So were the teacher training, were they effective in a way that they transferred what you want, the outcome that you want to achieve from this activity? And if you can share with us, how was the training? How did it take place? What was the first step of the training? And then towards the end, the what were the recommendations that teachers had to share? Were teacher recommendations also taken into consideration?
Okay, very interesting questions. I think we heard today, throughout the day, that change is difficult. So we work it in a context where teachers had all the control. It was heavily teacher centered. So it was the teachers who controlled the activities, the feedback, the correction. So your question has two parts, more information about the training and how effective it was in practice. So let me address the first part of the question, the training. Now, the training was before the start of the school year. We spent 2 full days with the teachers, introducing the ideas of self-determination theory the idea of autonomy, competence, and relatedness, and why it was important to support these in class and how to do this. And we also talked about pair work and how it could be used to support the children's sense of competence, autonomy, and relatedness. And teachers engage in micro teaching sessions during their training, where they actually taught parts of lessons using pair work and got feedback from the trainers and from the other teachers who attended the training. So this was the introduction or the first part of the training. But what was really important was the follow up. So we followed up with teachers in schools, and this was the core of the training. And the follow up worked. It was a three-stage models. So we sat with the teachers before they taught their lessons. We looked at their lesson plans and they talked about their ideas for implementing pair work that supported children competence, autonomy, and relatedness. Then we went with the teachers inside the classroom. We saw how they taught their lessons and how they used pair work. And after the classroom observations, we invited the teachers to reflect on what happened in the classroom and to think about what they want to do next class, the same thing or differently, and why. Towards the end of the school year and after we collected our data, unfortunately, this was the year of the COVID. It was 2020. So we were planning to hold sessions with the teachers to give them feedback on um, um, the analysis of the data we got from the children. We were not able to do this face to face, but we did this online. So we held the conference with the teachers where we reported something similar to what you saw today. So we told them exactly how the children felt and what they said about their experience of being taught using pair work. We are planning this year to hold more workshops with the teachers using, again, all the data we have from the children, reporting this back to the teachers and inviting them to reflect on what they can do with this information coming from the children.
So there was a gap, I understand, between. So where is the study now? Are you just sharing the findings from your previous study, or how are you continuing this? So the work you've done does not go to no outcome and no result. So if you can talk a little bit about what the future holds for this study.
Okay, so our study, was to give you more information, it was funded by the British Council, Ultra Research Papers. So formally, I mean, we conducted the research and it's already published. But because we're after sustainability, and because we worked for a whole year with the schools back in 2020, we still have relationships, not formal relationships, but we still have relationships with the teachers and the schools. So because our research was finally published now, and it was published in Arabic and English, what we want to do is to go back to the schools, not as part of this formal part of the research, but as a sustainability step on our part as researchers. We want to go back to the schools and share with the teachers the findings of our research. Because this is something we've learned from previous research and from working with teachers, is that many times teachers are not really aware of the impact of the practices inside the classroom. They don't really spend time reflecting on what they do in the classroom and the consequences of these on children learning and maybe well-being as well. So we're planning to go back to the, we're starting a dialogue with the schools now to see if we can arrange for a meeting where we can talk more about the finding of the research and invite the teachers among themselves to think of what actions they can take.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing, Ms. Lawari. And it's interesting how everything is connecting. We talked this morning in our first session about teachers and how important to align the expectation of teachers, especially in the classroom, and all the activities, everything they do as educators when they come to the student level and they understand that they're actions really have a huge weight on the students' growth, then the whole perception on life skills, social emotional learning changes. So it's a great that with you we started looking at case studies in Korea and Amman and more of a children-centered approach, and now we're looking at more of a teacher, I would say a combined, so teacher-centered and student-centered approach where teachers are equipped with all the resources and the tools they need to be able to deliver their work at a in a way that we want them to integrate all these great important skills in their teaching. I would like to open the floor, please, if you have any questions that you would like to ask Ms. Lawari before we move on. I think everybody sent me their questions directly to the chat. Oh, we have anybody would like to ask? Okay, so I think, all right, I'll call it once, twice. I think, Miss Elhawari, you're off the hook for now.
Okay, thank you, everyone, for the questions. I can also leave a link where, because now the research report is published, and it's published, as I said, in English and Arabic, and also a teacher training guide was produced as part of this research project. So I'm very happy to leave the link in the chat. So if anyone is interested in learning more about what we did with the teachers and the children.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Yeah. All right, we move on. I'm still waiting to get some other questions. I do have a few questions for Miss Jennifer and Mr. Jose. I know you've talked about conflict management, and it's I just want to bring this in parentheses. I worked with Search for Common Grounds in Morocco. We did a paper on mediation, and it's interesting how now conflict management is integrated within social and emotional learning, and how social emotional learning is a crucial component of conflict management, and how it involves all these teachings on how to understand, how to manage, how to resolve conflicts constructively. So what you brought in your presentation is not only thought-provoking, but it confirms things that we've been saying, especially coming from developing countries, that policies are not necessarily implemented the way we want them to be implemented. And from the top-down approach, before they get down, then there is no policy at all. So looking at what you've shared, both Jennifer and Jose, can you talk a little bit about what are the common features between all these countries that you've been to and you have implemented all these actions in place? What have you noticed in terms of implementation and outcome? And you can both answer this question. We have plenty of time.
Jose, would you like to go first? Or would you like me to? It's up to you.
You can go first. And I
All right. So I would say, well, I think I'll answer that question in this way, which is, how do you ensure sustainability? really that's what we're going for, right? So if a conflict occurs in a country, if there's a change in government, because many times, right, when we have a change in government, then certain things that those particular governments really cared about are then lost or forgotten or not funded any longer because the new person taking over in whatever country it is decides that, you know, they have a different priority. So one of the key things that we really need to think about if we're doing this good work in our countries is how do you make it be part of something that educators feel is part of their everyday work. So not as an add-on, not as something unique, but that is something that, well, this is how we should do business, right? This is how we should teach. And so incorporating it into teacher training and teacher preparation is a really strong way to help with that sustainability when funding may go by the wayside for whatever reason for countries. Because if you are preparing your teachers and how to do this well, then, and that becomes part of the requirements, then that's really going to help for it to be incorporated into the pedagogy as well as the curriculum itself. And so that's one of the things that I would say. But Jose, what are your thoughts?
Yes, building upon what you were saying, I would say that a very general thing that I have been identified is that the governments of the Latin American region have a political will to work in those topics. So conflict resolution, social emotional learning, peace education, citizenship education has become a very important topic in the region. So you found very many initiatives, programs, and policies around these topics. But also there is this gap between policy and reality that's really present in all of our countries. So it is very important to have these policies after the pandemic. It is very, very relevant. Mental health issues have become a crucial part of education right now, and we have to continue working in the policy level, but we have to articulate these top-down and bottom-up approaches. No, neither of those approaches are sufficient, and they are not excluded. So we have to continue working from government to communities, but we have also to work with teachers and communities to raise this awareness and to implement this because this becomes very practical at the end. You have to have pedagogic materials and didactic tools to make your class to work with your students, and it is a risk that this becomes just a narrative. It is very easy to people and to teachers in my country at least to talk about this, to talk about the importance of conflict resolution, to talk about SEL development, and this is not something to talk about, but to do with, to include it in the culture, in the practices, in everyday practices. That's the reason why teacher training is so important because you have to live with this. You have to put this in practice. The way I manage my conflicts as a teacher is something that tells that educate the students and model how to do this in real life. So it's not this is not related with workshops and or lectures. This is related more with a change of the culture of the school and all the way the people relate with each other. That's the reason why it's so difficult. But this is also the most beautiful thing about it. It's not just related with curriculum or laws or policies. Really, is related with people and every day. Every day we are constructing a very different way to treat each other, and the pandemic has become a very risk situation. We in Colombia have identified that students are related with each other in a very aggressive way after the pandemic. They there is this breach in learning that make that learning with each other has has become very problematic. And this has been raised this consciousness about this, and it's a big window of opportunity that we have to take advantage of.
And just one more quick note adding on to what Jose mentioned is that, you know, we shared that this shouldn't be an add-on in schools or universities, but how we operate. And, you know, social emotional learning, if we're talking about learning these skills, they should be a habit, right? So they should be an automatic response of how we engage when things happen in our lives, in the classroom, as teachers, being able to model that. And so that takes time too. So I think one of the other key pieces here is that sometimes schools or universities will do this work, and it's purely sharing the knowledge. So there's an awareness, but they're not focused on the skills development. And the practice is so key to this for this to be effective. So, you know, if we want this to be a way of how we operate, how we respond as educators, or our students to respond when they're faced with conflicts or other things that happen in their lives that are stressful, that we really need to focus on preparing them in the skills. And then that will also help with sustainability, because then there will be that expectation that, well, this is just how we do things, and becomes a habit for people is what we hope. But
Yeah, that's what we hope. They say it takes 21 days for an act to be a habit. I don't know if that's true or not, but with your teacher training programs, and you incorporated self principles to equip educators with all these necessary skills to promote conflict prevention and resolution. Can you give us some of the challenges that were faced during implementation?
Yes, I can begin with this answer if you want to. Uh, Teacher training for us is really key. So for training teachers, we'll work at different levels. The first one is the skills of the teachers as people. So if I am a teacher, I have to have a repertoire of skills to manage my own conflicts, to deal with my emotions, to have creative ways to have alternatives to manage my problematic situations. And this is very important because this is something that you live, that you are, not something that you teach. The second level is classroom management, to how to build democratic and safe learning environments. And in Colombia, for example, it's very difficult because teachers have not had really a training to do that. They don't have the tools to manage conflicts and power in their own classroom. So it has been a challenge to equip them with these tools after they go out their universities and they are working. And the third level is pedagogic and didactic. So how to make didactic and pedagogic experiences for my students to develop these skills. Not only tell them what to do, but design the opportunities to develop them. For example, we work with case studies, with role plays in order to play these competencies and skills in practice. And this is very challenging because it entails a paradigmatic change. It's not only related with this change in pedagogy, but with the change in the schools itself, in the structure and how do we build schools. For example, it is a big challenge that almost all schools in our country at least are built upon this idea of justice from a punitive approach, a retributive approach, and when you are looking for guilt in people to punish them, it is really problematic because it creates a climate that doesn't foster the development of social emotional skills, but could be also an obstacle. It could be problematic and prevent this kind of learning. So it's really a change at different levels, and teacher training is really important for us. I don't know, Jane, if you can add something.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, Sarah mentioned that she said, what, it takes 21 days to change a habit. So, um, because we want this to be an auto, pardon me?
As I was told, not
Sure.
sure, I don't have any empirical evidence on that.
Well, right, but it takes time, right? So whether it's 21 days or if it's 21 hours, right? So that's a really important piece, because when I worked in state government and we were working with our 3,600 public schools here to do this work, I would have teachers that say, "Oh, we tried that, but it didn't work." And I said, "Well, tell me about what you did." And they said, "Oh, well, we did a workshop for 3 hours and the children's behavior didn't change." And I would say, "I wish my behavior would change in 3 hours that I want to change." So I think that's really important too, because we want in education, many times we want a quick change, right? But it's going to take time. And so, putting in that skills development, it's going to take, 21 lessons or 30 lessons before, and practicing those skills, as Jose was talking about, takes time. And many times educators don't, for whatever reason, either want to, or they feel they don't have the time to do that. And yet we see those positive impacts that I'm sure you've been hearing from many of the other presentations. And I think the last thing that I want to share about that is, if we are able to help, make this not something that is unique or different, right? So, oh, this is the new, because those of us in education around the globe who've worked in education for 20 years or 25 years or more, or whatever, even 10 years, 5 years, we keep seeing these new programs or processes that people are trying to get us to include in our classrooms. And that is, and seen as an add-on, but also here in the United States, and we haven't talked about this at all, but there are legislators and policymakers that want to prevent the teaching of social emotional learning in our public schools and also in our colleges and universities. And what that tells me is that there's a lack of understanding about what social emotional learning is. And that, so if we don't have it as a norm of how we engage in the world, and we see it as some separate package or add-on, then we're going to continue to have more of these kinds of challenges, I think, as well. That we need to make it not just in schools and our colleges and universities, but a way of how we operate in our communities and cultures.
Oh, I was muted. I'm sorry. So I was saying, I totally agree. I think it takes time, it takes commitment, it takes consistency, and we should not lose hope. But at the same time, we should be able to push these government, civil society partners to collaborate and bring these changes to real life. I do have a few other questions for you, Jennifer, but I know Dr. Zawi is planning to leave soon. I would like to ask a few questions. Dr. Azawi, for your presentation, you talked about introducing e-learning, social emotional learning through e-learning for this time is different. We've been talking about social emotional learning at a primary level or secondary level, but with your presentation, we're talking about higher education. And so the question that comes to mind is it too late to introduce social emotional learning at the higher education level, or it will still have the same outcome because now we're preparing students to transition to adulthood, transition to careers? Can you talk to us a little bit about the value of introducing social emotional learning in higher education?
Thank you, Sarah. I think that is essentially due to the transfer of nature of the skills, and they are the most skills in the labor market.
I don't think that it's too late, but I have the conviction that we can start from the primary level and go to the higher education, because it is never late to have emotional and social skills to build and construct them and to perform in goals of life. I mean, personal life and professional life. If I have responded to your question.
Yes. So my other question is, now we've been talking about how important it is to provide teacher training, make sure that teachers are ready to implement all these social emotional learning approaches into a classroom. How do you do that with a professor? We know that with the implementation of some of these programs, we have had some, not reluctance, but sometimes resistance. Sometimes what Mr. Hawari talked about is change. Some teachers are comfortable with the status quo. They don't want to change the way they teach because they are not sure about that loss of control. So now that you introduce an e-social emotional learning to their agenda, how were they receptive to this change in their curriculum, or how did you introduce, or you're planning to introduce after you conducted this study, to higher education classes?
Okay, I have the conviction that we can both build specific and generic skills at the same time. So we don't have to touch social and emotional skills separately than specific skills like information, like build other skills. Because teachers and schools are expected to write student performance as measured through a lot of PISA and other tests, and to provide emotionally supportive environment that can contribute to students' social and emotional development. So, if we had the opportunity to work on situations and on digital environment, we can have a very interested solution for the construction of these skills, because we can do it in pair work, as said by Dr. Dalia. We can work in teamwork. We can have a lot of activities and projects that can involve the build of these skills. So it is an active pedagogy where the learner is active, is more, as I can say, in activity during the learning process, and it can be constructed easily, as we can say, by developing these skills.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zawi. I wish you have such a positive perception and view, and on how to integrate these skills, and you have also trust in our organizations that if we implement it right, then the outcome will be there and the result will be there. So with your positive hope, I want to ask, I know Jen and Jose wanted to share a few slides with us before we end this session. So Jose and Jennifer, you have 5 minutes if you would like, please, to share your slides before we conclude our session today.
Sure, great, thanks. We just thought we'd share a couple of resources. I want to say thank you so much to Dr. Azawi and our earlier colleague, and especially thinking about colleges and universities, and these are really important life skills. And so I think crafting the message that with this, and also thinking about the labor market and the global labor market, is so important. So let's take a look, and maybe would you like to share this resource, Jose?
Yes, and this web page is part of the work of the ESL Lab. It's called Explore SEL, and you can find here multiple frameworks and domains and skills to map and relate how this is understood in different parts of the globe and from different perspectives according to different kind of needs. And you can also make inputs in this, and if you want to include your approach or your framework, you can write these team, and they can add this. And this shows the richness of the topics and teams and approaches around SEL that you can build upon, and what you can take to work in your context. And the next slide showed the work of the Ecological Approaches to Social Emotional Learning Laboratory called ESL Lab. It is a very interesting web page where it is part of the origin of the Explore SEL initiative. And the ESL Lab in this page, you can find specific tools to work with your children if you work in schools. For example, I would recommend the kernels approach that are really usable tools to implement routines and small pieces of intervention, small actions that you can actually use in your everyday life. You can continue. Yeah.
If you want to go ahead and share about this one as well, Jose.
Okay. Castle is one of the leading organizations in this area. I think there are the responsible people to talk about social emotional learning as it is today. You can find here the definition they have constructed over the years, different kinds of initiatives and projects and programs that make this reality in different parts of the world. You can also find research papers around what we know and what evidence do we have about what works and what don't. Policy materials like policy briefs and policy declarations around this topic, and a resources web page where you find different kinds of tools.
Great, thanks. And then this is one that I would just like to share that again, actually Dr. Margaret Sinclair, who's also on right now and part of NISM, had worked on these safety, resilience, and social cohesion, a guide for education sector planners and curriculum developers. And so this really helps support that comprehensive approach about like, how do we make this, how do we make this sustainable, and how do we do this well? So there are these 5 booklets. I wanted to share these. They're from UNESCO and the other partners. And so those you can get free online as well to help you do this work. And then also the International Committee for the Red Cross, Red Crescent has a methodology guide. And so one of the big pieces that we know is that with teachers, we need to have them be able to model this work. So these are some of the methodology guide for humanitarian law curriculum that's free and online in multiple languages, is really helpful for engaging and learning the skills and application. And they give you these are some of the different kinds of strategies. So the small group work, like our earlier presenter talked about, how to do that well, using dilemmas and role playing, like Jose was talking about, the writing reflections, discussions, and how we engage people in learning and modeling these skills actively. So I wanted to leave you with that. And then we'll share the rest of these slides with NISM. And so if they'd like to share those with others so that you have some of those other resource links, you can have those. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Dr. Azawi. Thank you, Dr. Dalia. This was such a rich session. I was very excited to hear about the different approaches from different corners of the world, and it's always great to hear from all these different contexts, but we are all working together towards one common goal. So thank you for such a rich, insightful, valuable contribution today. We will share with you the presentations, and we'll share links with you as we receive them from our presenters today. Thank you again. I said this morning that we have to, as educators and researchers, have to bring ourselves to our students' level, because with that we are consolidating and reinforcing the trust and the bond between students and teachers. And today, hearing what Dr. Alia said, it's important to connect with the teachers, equip teachers with all the resources and the tools they need to perform their jobs, and use conflict management tools in order to be able to sustain and in order to be able to increase that social emotional learning approach into conflict management. And we concluded with that it's never too late. Even if we introduce social emotional learning at at your higher education level, you're in college, it's very important to still integrate those holistic skills and holistic development for a well-rounded individual. With that, I'll leave you for our next session. We have quite a long break. So for those who are in the US, it's time for us to go get coffee and breakfast. It's 7 a.m. For those joining us from the other corners of the world, I will let you go for an hour and a half, and our next session is at 2 GMT. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.